Hello, welcome to the Daily Friend Show brought to you by the Institute of Race Relations. Today, I'm Marius Verret, head of campaigns here, and today I'm joined by Gabriel Krause, Nick Lorimer, and Gerbrand van Heerden. Today we've got three things to talk about, and first thing we'll be talking about is the court case around the possible banning of the old South African flag. Gabriel was in court this week to observe it, and do you want to tell us a little bit about it, Gabriel?
Sure thing. 2 days worth of proceedings. I think the key takeaway, if you're only going to take one thing away, is that the Nelson Mandela Foundation first made an appeal for relief to the court to declare the flag hate speech. So this was sort of came out of a legal debate between the head of the Mandela Foundation and the head of AfriForum, who on air had a discussion about whether this would be allowed in the abstract. And so they were asking the court to say, look, you shouldn't be waving the flag. Now, AfriForum's advocate, Mark Oppenheimer, made the argument that the courts do not generally make rulings about abstract debates. The place to do that is WITS or the UCT or the Sunday Times. It's not the court. The court traditionally needs a concrete case, and it's going to rule on that. So that wasn't in the original appeal. And so it looked like a reason to throw the case out, kind of on technical, procedural grounds. And then what happened at the last minute is that the advocate for the Mandela Foundation, Tebeka, he said, well, look, AfriForum did wave the flag, and we are asking the court to indict AfriForum for waving the flag in just the way that the court indicted Julius Malema in 2011 for singing Kill the Boer. And it's a really unusual legal argument to make for two reasons. The first reason is you can see in the papers that was not the relief originally sought, despite what he said. And secondly, of course, Julius Malema undisputably sang the song several times in particular contexts, and the Equality Court in 2011 found that it was in those contexts that the song should be banned, but not for anyone else, just for Julius Malema and the ANC because of the context in which they had used it. Everyone else was allowed to sing the song. So likewise, the relief that the Mandela Foundation originally sought to ban the flag for everyone, including, as they insisted, in your bathrooms, in your bedrooms, in your homes, is nothing like the cut and paste that he was calling for from the 2011 thing. And of course, the biggest difference is that AfriForum just didn't wave the flag. Yeah. There was a bit of false news, fake news put out there by ENCA, and the journalist who put it out there originally, Nicholas Bauer, he apologized. He said this was fake news. And there were two other sort of pictures that were disseminated, but there's no evidence that those flags were displayed by AfriForum members. They could have been displayed by trolls, just like the person who put the first the fake flag thing, the fake news, who were trying to discredit the protests rather than trying to rally support. So there's no evidence on the ground that the flag was ever actually flown. And so any kind of ruling that comes out of that is going to be...
when can we expect a ruling on it?
So judgment is reserved. It could be a week. It could be a couple of weeks.
Okay.
I think the judgment will matter. Of course, what's happened is also important. The flag has been kind of displayed in a lot of newspapers, a lot of websites. And one of the questions that the judge asked is, doesn't it matter that people are traumatized when they look at that flag? And I think the answer is yes, it does matter. It is relevant. Legally speaking, it's insufficient for banning it because you need not only harm, you also need an incitement to do harm, and you need generally the attempt to propagate hatred against others.
But should the flag be banned, Nick?
Wait, can I just say one more thing about that, though? Just about what matters about that trauma is that if you look back at 2014, Cyril Ramaphosa, now the president of the country, was running a campaign with Jacob Zuma in which he said, look, if you don't vote for the ANC, you're going to be bringing apartheid back.
The Boers will come back.
So that's trauma. And that trauma is relevant. And the trauma of the flag being displayed by journalists all around the country in newspapers, that's relevant. It might have a relevant effect on the election. But that doesn't mean that those newspapers should be banned. It doesn't mean that anyone who displays it should be disallowed from doing it.
Yeah. So then, do you think it should be banned, Nick?
Well, obviously, a lot of people need to make the distinction between is something illegal or is something morally wrong. And there's a lot of obtuseness in this debate on the part of people who seem to confuse the fact that you can be against the waving of the flag in a sort of personal capacity, but also not believe that it should be made illegal. Because, of course, there are very practical arguments beyond the principled ones for why the flag shouldn't be made illegal, such as that if it is made illegal, it will become a sort of underground symbol on the radical fringes. If you look at the sort of white nationalist terrorist attacks in places like the US, like Dylan Roof, who shot up the people in that black church in North Carolina, or alternatively, the Christchurch shooter, those people are often drawn to symbols that are considered forbidden or outside the law. So banning it would only strengthen the allure of it as a symbol. It would become a sort of rallying cry for those fringe elements. Whereas if it's left legal, it is recognized for what it really is, which is actually irrelevant largely to our modern context.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just on that, so like going back to the Malema case in 2011, when he was indicted for singing the Kill the Boer song, it really backfired. Kusatu and the SACP came out, said this is a racist judgment. Elements of the ANC said this is a racist judgment. And although he was then elbowed out of the ANC Youth League, he got this sort of bad boy, martyr, street cred ability, which he then leveraged to now have 1 million supporters.
So arguably it gave us the EFF.
Yeah.
Think of that.
Yeah, I think it's similar when you look at the Rhodes Must Fall protest, what happened there. Removing the statues, just by removing the statues, you didn't remove history.
Yeah.
And had they kept the statues there, whoever felt negative towards the statue could have taken their anger out, maybe vandalized it, or maybe organize a debate in front of the statues, or just debate what the statue represents and how relevant it is in the South African context. But I think it doesn't erase history, and I think those types of things like the statues and the flags, as controversial as they are, they open up avenues to talk over these things, and we shouldn't be brushing them under the carpet.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think the issue with the flag is the same as with free speech. You should be allowed to say almost anything, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. So same means the flag should not be banned, but that also doesn't mean you should be waving it around, because it is insensitive to a lot of people in the country. But also, I don't think the government should be going around banning flags. It's
but there's also, context is so important, which is why the court needs a particular case.
Yes.
It's almost a universally understood bit of semiotics that if you fly a flag upside down, you're desecrating the flag. So if I were to fly the old apartheid flag upside down in order to make fun of people who have an upside down racist way of thinking, the Nelson Mandela Foundation would consider me to be a racist just for waving the flag. The ANC Youth League a couple of weeks ago wanted to engage in a little bit of civic debate by burning Peter Louis Myburgh's book. Now, it's one thing if you haven't bought them first, but it's another thing if you've bought them. Legally, you should be protected from going to burn them. They said, bring the books and bring some old apartheid flags. We're going to display them together, then we're going to burn them together. If they got stopped halfway through that process by the police, then according to the Nelson Mandela Foundation, they'd be guilty of being racist too and calling for apartheid to come back. The real context in which waving the flag, for sure, would be an illegal gesture in the same way that singing Kill the Boer was, is if someone waved the flag to draw a rally. They said, this flag is awesome. What we need to do is bring apartheid back and oppress black people. That would be inciting harm, that would be propagating hatred, and it would be immediately harmful to anyone who became knowledgeable about that event.
The flag itself not be doing that.
No, it's the whole context.
Yeah. So it's all very interesting debate, and we'll see what the court decides to on the flag. But moving on, Harry, you've written an article for the Daily Friend this week about regulations around business. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so just a little bit background context. The number of small, medium, and micro enterprises in South Africa have increased by 9% since 2016. So there is a slight uptick in small businesses. I think the number stands around 2.6 million currently. And also another thing that should be considered is the fact that small businesses, and this is true for everywhere around the world, are major employers. So small businesses in South Africa employ around 10 million people, and that's about 60% of the total working population in South Africa. So policymakers really need to be concerned around the issues that face small businesses. The 60% share of all employment, we're actually underperforming in many other countries, especially in more developed countries. The share of employment made up by small businesses hovers around 70-80%. So we are definitely underperforming in that sense. And a lot of one of the major obstacles that face small businesses, skills, that's also a big one, but another big one is, of course, regulations. So only 50% of small business owners feel confident that they will have the necessary conducive environment to grow their business. Another 50% said that they have only recently employed a person in the last year, and the issues in terms of regulation that's causing or limiting small businesses' potential is also reflected by South Africa's ranking in terms of the Global Competitiveness Report, brought out by the World Economic Forum. So we've been steadily falling each year, especially, and one of our main weaknesses is the labor market.
Yeah.
So we rank 111th out of 140 countries in terms of hiring and firing practices. So it's very difficult to fire employees, and I can understand from a workers' rights perspective why we have those regulations, but at the same time, it's kind of a deterrent to especially small businesses to employ someone. And then another where we also fail is the fact that we land in the bottom 10 in terms of employer and labor relations. And we're also in the bottom 10 in terms of wage flexibility negotiations. Okay. If I remember correctly, the national minimum wage was implemented in January. And so small businesses, because they're small, they don't have the finances or the resources that big corporates do to be able to absorb these change in regulations and this increase in the minimum wage. And I think what also needs to be considered is the upcoming fourth industrial revolution, because the big businesses will move to adopt technologies in order to be more sufficient, so that they'll become less labor intensive. But with the small businesses will be slow to adopt those changes. So they'll remain more areas where human capital is still valuable. So in that sense as well, the issues of small businesses should be prioritized by government.
Are there any quick fixes, Nick? Do you think?
I don't think there are any quick fixes, but part of the problem is that we're not really trying to fix these things. This is the core of our economic problem, of our huge unemployment, of our backwards economic growth. And yet we spend all of our time arguing about flags and the agricultural sector, even though this is actually what's going to make the most difference in most people's lives.
I think that's a very good point, and I think we've running a bit out of time here. So I'm going to say thanks to everybody for watching, and next week we'll probably be talking about the elections mainly. So that's obviously, unless you've been living under a rock, you'll probably know it's next week, Wednesday, on the 8th of May. But thanks for watching, and until next time, we'll see you on the Daily Friend Show.